So being chairman of the drafting committee of our constitution, Ambedkar himself also contributed certain ideals or principles to the constitution. So he was hence referred as the chief architect of the constitution. Ambedkar, he was an eminent jurist, economist, politician and social reformer. That means he is an eminent jurist. That means he studied law and he knows how the laws can be made and how the laws will be interpreted, which laws will be useful for people. And he was an eminent jurist. He knows about the judicial aspects and other things. Economist, that means he knows how the economy of the countries operate and how financially you have to progress the country, what kind of principles will help the country to progress economically well. And he's a good politician, so that he will know, he will try to incorporate the principles in constitution to create a very good political system in the country. And he's also a social reformer, coming himself from a very backward community. He knows how to uplift those backward classes people. So he was even a social reformer. So being a multi-talented person like this, he was referred as a chief architect, and his contributions were majorly seen in the areas of rights of people, like civil liberties, and in rights of religions, and abolition of untouchability, social rights for women. That means he worked even for giving certain rights to women in this country. And also reservation systems were even brought up by Ambedkar, because he thought that in those days the backward classes need some upliftment, need some boost, so that they can also come and compete with the regular people in the society. So he was responsible in contributing his major section in the development of the backward classes, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, so like that. And he was, let us see now what are in principle what are his contributions. He made constitution in such a way that, or he saw constitution in making in such a way that it will be workable and flexible. That means in practice the constitution should be applicable. It's not that something like philosophically it should be present and in practice it should fail. And it should be flexible. That means even in future, if the future politicians or future people, if they want to make some changes according to the situation, the constitution can also be made in such a way. And safeguards to minorities and educationally backward people. So as you know, he came from a backwards community, and now he always works for those people's development. He included several safeguards like reservations and right to constitutional remedies. That means, see, right to constitutional remedy is a very important fundamental right. So where it protects all the fundamental rights through courts. So if any fundamental right is not guaranteed, or if any fundamental right is stopped by government, then the right to constitutional remedy will come to help. This fundamental right, called right to constitutional remedy, will enable all the fundamental rights to be operational, and hence Ambedkar calls it as heart of the constitution, because of this constitutional remedies fundamental right, all other fundamental rights will be protected from the action of governments. When governments turn hyperactive and all, sometimes they try to restrict fundamental rights. So during such time, this right to constitutional remedies will protect people's rights. Single citizenship, which you have already studied. Single integrated judiciary, that means throughout the country we have a single set of judiciary, that means Supreme Court, High Court and local courts. They are all integrated, they are not separate, they all function under the Supreme Court. And uniformity in fundamental laws, that means wherever you go in the country, the laws will be applicable in the same manner, not that you change to a state and now the law will change. So it is the same, uniform in the laws. And Ambedkar always wished for strong central government, and the administrative discipline he always was focusing. A strong central government, he feels that it will always keep this country united. And it was Ambedkar who incorporated the directive principles. He worked major on this area, because directive principles are nothing but guidelines to government to start doing welfare things for people, to start doing development programs and welfare things for people. So those are all were given in the form of directive principles. They are like guidelines to people, the government, so that based on these guidelines they can start some programs and they can do the welfare of the. After looking into the contributions of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, So let us proceed towards what are the other happenings in the preparation of the constitution. So once the committees were assigned their jobs, they started preparing their own copies of details on the issues that have been allotted to them. And so in that process, the Constituent Assembly has taken up several readings. So what do you mean by reading? So the discussions on draft copies prepared by various committees are known as readings. So as I've told you earlier, these committees, they'll refer many things. They'll prepare some preliminary information on the topics assigned to them, and they'll take the topics written on a paper, and they'll come to Constituent Assembly. And in the Constituent Assembly, they'll go for discussion, which will add some points to them, or which sometimes they may remove something which is not necessary from that things which they have prepared. And the discussions which will take place on the topics which they have brought to the Constituent Assembly, they were known as readings. Suppose a committee has brought up with certain guidelines regarding fundamental rights, then these things will be discussed in Constituent Assembly, and that discussion is called as reading. And on all these committees have underwent nearly 3 readings. So the first reading happened on November 4th 1948, and the second reading on October 17th 1949, and the third reading on November 26th 1949. So these drafting committees, they came and discussed in this Constituent Assembly during 3 readings, and these 3 readings were very important, where they brought several changes to what they have done, so that they could finally prepare a draft copy with 395 articles and 8 schedules. See, let us discuss these articles and schedules in detail in later classes, but these are the provisions of the constitution. You can call the articles and schedules. They are now the ways through which these committees have incorporated the details of the constitution. The details of the constitution were included in 395 articles and 8 schedules, and these all articles and 8 schedules were these were formulated in 3 readings: first reading, second reading, and third reading. So by taking up 3 discussions in 2 years, they have finally come up with a final copy which is ready to yet to be accepted. And the Constituent Assembly took nearly 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days to prepare the final draft copy. That means after all the discussions, they were ready with a final copy which is yet to be passed in the Constituent Assembly. And you can see the newspaper cutting of India becoming republic. So that we'll discuss later, but you can see that picture now, all the newspapers mentioning about India becoming republic because it has accepted its constitution on that day. So let us see what is that in our next slides. In continuation with our the readings of the Constituent Assembly, that means the draft copies which were brought by the drafting committees, they were under discussions under various phases, right? First reading, second reading, and third reading. And this third reading is very important. So the third reading happened on November 26th 1949. So I repeat, the third reading occurred on November 26th 1949, and on this third reading, the final draft copy of the Constitution was adopted by Constituent Assembly. So the Constitution had its first visibility on November 26th 1949. So on this day, the drafting committee or the Constituent Assembly adapted all the draft copies prepared by the drafting committees, and it has passed it in the form of a resolution that the copy which they have prepared is finally acceptable with no changes. So all the changes were made in the previous readings, and in the third final reading they have finally adapted the constitution, or they have finally adapted the draft copy into a permanent constitution. And after the draft copy was passed on November 26th 1949, immediately the constitution did not came into operation. Only the citizenship and the rules regarding citizenship were into action. That means the rules and regulations and the principles regarding citizenship only started implemented from November 26, 1949, because by this time, you all might have known 1947 partition later on created later several problems with India, because there were many communal riots and many such things happened. People fought for, there were some communal riots you call based on religion. People got killed, many such things happened in the country, and the country was in small disturbance again. So at this point of time, when the third reading was finished on November 26th, 1949, only citizenship and its related things in constitution came immediately into effect, not the entire constitution. And after a month, after November 26, then December 26, then December 1949 will come, and later on January 26th, 1950, the constitution completely came into force, adopted and passed on November 26th, 1949, and came into force from January 26th, 1950. So there is a reason why the constitutional makers have made constitution to come into action from January 26th, 1950. That we'll discuss later. And after this constitution has been passed, see Rajagopalachari, you can see that his picture in the slide. He became the Governor General, because till then Lord Mountbatten was acting as Governor General for India. So instead of him, the C. Rajagopalachari came into that Governor General position, and Constituent Assembly slowly turned itself into a provisional parliament. That means not fully elected parliament, but it's a basic parliamentary structure. It turned itself into a parliament. And after this constitution came into force on January 26, 1950, then immediately in 1951, the next following year, there were general elections throughout the country. And after the general elections, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was the president of Constituent Assembly, he later became the first president of India, or the first president of Republic India. So in the implementation of constitution, immediately citizenship details, or the citizenship rules and regulation came into effect, because the country underwent partition, and it was necessary for the political leaders in the country to know who are the citizens of our country, or know who are the citizens who went off to Pakistan. So there was some necessity to differentiate like that, and hence they first implemented citizenship and other details, and later from January 26th, 1950, constitution came into effect in a full-fledged manner. In the previous slide, we have discussed that our constitution was adopted and passed on November 26, 1949, but even though it was adopted on November 26th, it came into force from January 26th of the next year, that is 1950. So why do you think why do you think the constitution came into force on January 26th, 1950? So there is some significance for this January 26th. So let us see what is that significance. See, during the national movement, Indian National Congress was a major political party which was leading the national movement. And this Indian National Congress had a habit of meeting every year in a particular place and passing a resolution to further promote the national movement. So every year they meet at a particular place and they take a decision, pass that resolution, and they take up that issue for the complete year. In such things of the Indian National Congress, on 19th December 1929, so under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Indian National Congress has passed a resolution at its Lahore session. So in the place called Lahore, which is now modern day Pakistan, the Congress party met it has met, and in this meeting they passed a resolution of Purna Swaraj, that means total independence. From 1929 December, the Congress party is declaring in its meeting that from now India is going to become a totally free country. They are going to work for making India into a total free country from British. And after 19th December 1929 December's resolution, a public declaration was also made. That means after passing in its Lahore session, Congress party held a public meeting and it has declared that 26th January 1930 will be considered as a complete Independence Day for the country. And from then onwards, almost 17 years till 1947 August 15th, Congress party was celebrating this 26th January as complete Independence Day or Purna Swaraj Day. So hence, as constitution was also adopted, on this, 26th January 1949, and December is very nearby for them. So they thought January 26th will be an ideal day for the constitution to come into force. So because on January 26th in 1929, Congress has made a Purna Swaraj declaration. So they considered this day as is a very important day, and hence they thought it is let us bring our constitution into force from that day. So this is the significance of January 26th, and as we said that it is Purna Swaraj Day. So how come accepting our constitution will become Purna Swaraj? Because on January 26th, 1950, we became totally independent. That means after framing our rules and regulations, then we are completely eligible to rule ourselves. Hence, you can see Lord Mountbatten will also leave India after our constitution getting adopted, and C. Rajagopalachari will take up as Governor General. So India will become republic. That means completely independent only after accepting its constitution, not on August 15th, 1947. August 15th, 1947, British have officially left India. It is an Independence Day, no doubt in that. But complete Independence Day is from January 26th, so in 1950. So hence that day was celebrated as Republic Day. So with the significance of January 26th, the lesson ends. But it doesn't mean that you have learned the total chapter. See, after going through all the chapter, if you don't understand what is the meaning of constitutional republic, then no, it is a mere waste. So let us study, or let us try to understand what is this constitutional republic. That means any country which is having a constitution will turn into a republican country. So a constitutional republic is a state in which the head of the state and other officials are representatives of people. Here the head of the state means like you can call like president and all, and under him we know that the political masters like prime minister and his council of ministers will try to become the representatives, and that means this constitutional heads like president and together with the executives like prime minister and council of ministers, they all will be working together and they all should work under a constitution, and such countries are called constitutional republican countries. And in such countries the executive, legislative and judicial powers will be separated into different branches. So the purpose of learning this chapter is that India has framed its constitution and finally it has adopted, and it even made a republic day. This all for making this country republican country where a government will be elected by the people. A government will be made through people's representatives, and there will be a head of the state or like head of the country, president generally head of the state they call, and all these people they work under the constitution. They are not extra constitutional powers, and under constitution these people will function. And where does this constitution will get power? Constitution gets its power from people, okay, not from anywhere else. So through the power of people a constitution is framed, and this constitution has made India as a republican country where there will be a government headed by a person, and they all will separate the powers in the form of legislative, judicial and executive, and even though they are separated they all work for the governance of the country. Thus constitution plays a very important role in the governance of country. So by this the chapter our constitution ends here.